The zip tie bit into her wrists before she had a chance to say a single word. Constable Travis Renwick of the Harlow Falls RCMP detachment thought he had caught himself something big. He thought the woman standing next to the black Cadillac Escalade on the shoulder of Highway 11 was nervous because she was guilty. He thought the military-issue identification card in her wallet was a forgery. He thought the ribbons and insignia on the uniform hanging in the back seat were decorations for a Halloween costume someone had left in the car. He was wrong. He was catastrophically, career-endingly wrong. The woman he had just shoved face first against the cold hood of a government-registered vehicle was Colonel Serena Ibarra Nichols, Deputy Commander of the Canadian Army's 4th Division, recipient of the Meritorious Service Medal, and the woman who had spent the last 14 months restructuring the emergency logistics framework for Canada's entire Arctic defence corridor. She was 47 years old. She was driving back to CFB Borden from a weekend visit to her mother's grave, and she had a briefing with the Chief of the Defence Staff in Ottawa in less than 3 hours. By the time Constable Renwick's shift ended, he would not need to worry about briefings. He would not need to worry about shifts at all. This is how it happened. The October sky over Natun, Ontario was the colour of old pewter, a flat, bruised grey that pressed down on the highway like a lid on a pot. It was a Sunday 11:40 in the morning. Colonel Serena Ibarra Nichols had the heated seat set to 2, a Tim Hortons medium dark roast in the cup holder going cold, and the CBC radio documentary about Vimy Ridge playing at low volume on the dash speakers. She wasn't in uniform. She had driven up to Sudbury Friday evening in civilian clothes, dark wool slacks, a camel pea coat, leather gloves, to spend 2 days doing what she had done every October for the past 6 years, sit beside her mother's headstone in a cemetery off Paris Street, talk to her the way you talk to someone who can still hear, and drive home carrying the particular weight of the living. She checked the speedometer, 110 in a 100 zone. She reduced it to even before she saw the lights. The OPP cruiser had been parked under the shadow of an overpass, running dark. The moment her Escalade passed, the light bar erupted in red and blue, and the cruiser pulled out with the eagerness of a vehicle that had been waiting for something, anything, to happen on a quiet Sunday morning. Serena signalled, slowed down, moved to the shoulder with deliberate, unhurried precision, the same deliberate, unhurried precision she had used to land a CH-147 Chinook in a whiteout outside of Iqaluit in 2019. She placed both hands on top of the steering wheel and waited. The officer took his time getting out of the cruiser. He walked slowly, one hand resting on the top of his belt, not quite on his holster but close enough to make the point. He was perhaps 28, with a thick neck and the kind of flat, watchful expression that some people learn in police college and some people are born with. His name tag said Renwick. He didn't approach the driver's window directly. He came up at an angle, stopping just behind the rear door pillar, a position that put him out of Serena's natural sightline and forced her to turn her head awkwardly to address him. She had done the courses. She knew why they did that. She lowered the window fully. "Good morning, Constable." "License and registration?" "No acknowledgement, no good morning." "Of course." She kept her voice level, her hands visible. "I'm going to reach into the glove box. My registration is in there." "I can see you reaching." His voice was flat. "What else is in the glove box?" "The vehicle registration and the insurance slip." "What's in the back?" She glanced in the rear-view mirror. He was looking past her into the back seat, where her Canadian Armed Forces service dress uniform hung from the passenger grab handle in a clear garment bag, the 3 gold maple leaf pips of a colonel on the epaulettes clearly visible, along with the pale blue ribbon of the Meritorious Service Medal. "That is my uniform," Serena said. Renwick leaned forward slightly, squinting. "Your uniform?" "Yes, I'm a colonel in the Canadian Army." There was a pause. The kind of pause that is not really a pause but a decision being made. "Is that for a Remembrance Day event?" Renwick asked, and there was something in the way he said it, a slight emphasis on the word "for," that made the question mean something other than what the word said. Serena felt the familiar cold thing settle somewhere just below her sternum. She had felt it before, at mess dinners, where she was the only black officer at the table, and someone made a joke they thought she wouldn't understand, in procurement meetings, where men twice her rank talked over her, until she said something that reminded them. She outranked them. "It is not for an event," she said carefully. "It is my service dress uniform. I am returning to CFB Borden from personal leave. I have identification." "Step out of the vehicle, please." "Constable, I have not been told the reason for the stop." "Step out of the vehicle." She stepped out. The cold hit her immediately. the wet Ontario October cold that has teeth in it. She stood at the side of the highway with her hands visible and her posture absolutely straight, the posture of someone who had been standing at attention since she was 19 years old and had never stopped. Renwick looked her up and down, then he looked at the uniform in the window again. You said you're a colonel? That is correct. In the Canadian Army. Yes. Where are you based? CFB Borden. I am the Deputy Commander, 4th Division. Renwick made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Can I see your military ID? It's in my wallet, in my purse, on the passenger seat. I'll need to reach back in. I'll get it. He moved past her to the passenger window, opened the door without asking, and picked up her purse from the seat. He unzipped it himself, rummaged, and pulled out her wallet. He opened it. He looked at the D&D Common Access card, the Defense Department photo ID with her rank, her service number, her security clearance indicator, her photograph in uniform, and his expression did not change. This could be fake, he said. The cold thing in Serena's chest became something harder. Constable Renwick, she said, pronouncing each syllable with the precision of someone reading a targeting coordinate. That card was issued by the Department of National Defense. There is a verification line printed on the back. If you call it, they will confirm my identity within 60 seconds. I don't have time to call every number on every ID people hand me. He dropped the wallet back into her purse without closing it. There's a reason we run things through our system. Turn around. I beg your pardon. Hands behind your back. I'm detaining you pending verification. On what grounds? Possible identity document fraud. And you were speeding. I was at 110. I reduced to 100 before you activated your lights. My vehicle has a D&D GPS data logger. Turn around, ma'am. She turned around. She put her hands behind her back because she had spent 28 years making decisions about which battles and when, and she knew that the side of Highway 11 in the cold, with a man who had already decided something, was not the battlefield she had chosen. The zip tie went on tighter than it needed to. She felt it on the radial nerve of her left wrist and said nothing. A second cruiser arrived 4 minutes later. Constable Derek Farris was older, broader, the kind of officer who had plateaued at his current rank and made peace with it in a way that had curdled into complacency. He hitched his belt getting out of the car and called out, "What have we got, Renwick?" "Possible document fraud. Says she's a colonel, has a uniform in the back." Farris walked over. He looked at Serena the way you look at something you've already catalogued. Then he looked at the uniform in the window, at the rank insignia, at the medals. "Halloween's not until the end of the month," he said. Serena looked at him with the expression she had used on various occasions to reduce a major to silence at 50 paces. "My name is Colonel Serena Ibarra Nichols. I am the Deputy Commander of the 4th Division. That is my service dress uniform. This is my vehicle registered to the Department of National Defense. If either of you would like to call the CFB Borden duty officer, I can give you that number from memory right now." "We'll sort it out at the detachment," Farris said. He looked at Renwick. "Call a tow for the Escalade." "You do not have grounds to impound a federally registered vehicle," Serena said. Her voice had dropped an octave, the way it did before she walked into a room to fire someone. "We have grounds to secure it while we investigate the document fraud," Farris said. "There is no document fraud. Ma'am, cooperate or I add obstruction." She was put in the back of Renwick's cruiser. The seat was hard plastic. The heat was on too high and smelled of chemical cleaning spray over something that hadn't quite been cleaned away. She sat with her wrists zip-tied behind her and looked straight ahead and began, quietly and methodically, to count the things she would need to do in what order, and who she would call first when they gave her a phone, and what words she would use, and how long it would take for those words to take effect. She was very calm. She was calm in the way that a pressure system is calm before it becomes weather. The Harlow Falls RCMP detachment was a beige brick building at the edge of a small town that had 3 traffic lights and a Tim Hortons and not much else. They brought her through the front desk, zip tie still on, past a young constable who glanced up and then looked quickly away, the way people look away from things they sense they shouldn't be seeing. The desk sergeant was a woman named Paulette Gauthier, who had been working that desk for 19 years and who looked at Serena with the kind of appraising, still look that comes from spending 2 decades watching people walk through that door. She looked at the tailored peacoat. She looked at the straight spine, the composure, the absence of any of the usual tells of someone in actual trouble. She frowned. "What are we doing here?" she said to Farris. "Identity fraud, possible impersonation of a military officer." Gauthier looked at Serena again. She been processed? Not yet. Process her and get her a phone. After fingerprinting. She can have the phone during processing. Renwick cut the zip tie. Serena rolled her wrists once, feeling the blood come back, and said nothing. They took her fingerprints. They took her photograph. She looked into the camera with an expression that would later be described by the journalist who got hold of the photo through an access to information request as the face of someone keeping score. When they handed her the phone, Renwick said local calls. Serena looked at him. The matter I need to address is in Ottawa. Local calls. Constable. She took one step closer to the front desk, close enough that Gauthier could hear her clearly. I have a scheduled briefing with the Chief of the Defence Staff at 14:30. If I am not on a secure line to the D&D duty officer in the next 5 minutes, my GPS tracking, which is active on my service vehicle and on this phone, will flag my location as non-responsive. At that point, the protocol is not to send a search party. The protocol is to assume a security incident and escalate directly to the National Security Advisor's office. She paused. I would very much prefer to avoid that, Constable. So would you? Gauthier stood up. Give her the long-distance line, she said. The phone was a landline on the booking desk. Serena dialed a number she had known since her first posting. It rang once. D&D Operations Center, Duty Watch, authenticate. Conta Tahitian Juliet Golf 77 Alpha. This is Colonel Serena Barra-Nichols, Regimental Number 44921. I am currently being detained at the Harlow Falls OPP detachment in Ontario. I need to speak to the Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff, Priority 1. There was a brief silence on the line, the kind of silence that has people moving in it. Colonel Barra-Nichols, stand by, authenticating now. Constable Farris had stopped moving. Constable Renwick had stopped moving. Gauthier was standing perfectly still behind the desk, with the expression of someone watching a story change direction at high speed. Conta Nikishan confirmed, Colonel. I'm patching you to the DCDS's office now, please hold. The hold lasted 11 seconds. Then a voice came on that everyone in that room recognized from news conference clips, a dry, precise, entirely unhurried voice. Barra-Nichols, you were supposed to be in this building 40 minutes ago. What's your situation? Serena looked at Farris. She looked at Renwick. She kept her voice level. General OC, I am being detained at the Harlow Falls OPP detachment. I have been restrained, my vehicle has been impounded, and I've been accused of forging my own military identification. The officers involved are Constable Travis Renwick and Constable Derek Farris. The voice on the phone did not raise itself. It did not need to. Say that once more for me, Colonel. I am in a holding area at an OP detachment in Northern Ontario, sir, in zip ties. My service dress uniform has been seized as potential evidence of impersonating a military officer. A pause of approximately 4 seconds, which is a very long time when a 3-star general is on the other end of the line. Stay on the line, do not hang up. Then, muffled but audible, in the background of the most secure building in the Canadian military, get me the commissioner of the OPP, get me the minister's office, and get Jag on the line right now. The air in the Harlow Falls OPP detachment changed. It became the kind of air that is in a room just before a storm arrives, still and pressurized and full of things about to move. Constable Renwick had gone the color of old paper. He looked at Farris. Farris was staring at the phone in Serena's hand like a man watching a grenade he had just pulled the pin on. Sarge, Farris said to Gauthier, his voice half its previous volume, is she? I think she might be exactly what she said she was, Gauthier said quietly. The phone crackled. A new voice, a woman's voice, clipped and fast. Colonel Barra-Nichols, this is Major Sylvie Tran, JAG Corps. We have your location confirmed. Are you physically injured? Minor soft tissue at both wrists from a zip tie, no other injuries. Understood. We are in contact with the OPP Commissioner's office. The Commissioner is speaking to the detachment commander within the next 3 minutes. Do not let them move you, touch anything in your vehicle, or access any further personal items. You are being recorded on our end from this moment. Copy. Renwick took one step towards Serena, perhaps to take the phone back, and Gauthier moved to cut him off. Don't, she said, and something in the way she said it made him stop. 7 minutes later, the detachment commander arrived. He was a chief superintendent named Paul Leclerc, who had driven from his house in his civilian clothes and not taken the time to change, and who walked through the door looking at Serena with an expression of someone doing rapid and very uncomfortable arithmetic. Colonel Barra-Nichols, he said. Chief Superintendent. I am so deeply sorry. He shot a look at Renwick and Farris that could have stripped paint. Your vehicle is being retrieved from the tow yard right now. Your uniform is untouched. I am personally driving you to the airport in Sudbury and arranging a DND aircraft to get you to Ottawa. That will not be necessary, Chief Superintendent. What is necessary is a full account of the incident on record, beginning with the reason for the initial stop. What happened in the 2 hours that followed was not visible from the highway, but the results of it were. Leclerc suspended Renwick and Faris pending an immediate professional standards investigation. He called the OPP Commissioner himself to get ahead of what he already knew was coming. He was right to hurry. He was not fast enough. Because Nadia, the 23-year-old nursing student who had been stopped on the same shoulder at the same overpass by Constable Renwick 8 months earlier, stopped for a broken taillight that was not broken, detained for 40 minutes, let go without explanation, had seen the news alert on her phone. She had screenshotted the CBC headline. She had posted it to her account with 4 words and a photograph of the citation she had received that day, the one she'd fought and had dismissed. Still surprised? I'm not. By the time Serena's DND flight touched down at Uplands, the post had been shared 60,000 times. The detachment surveillance footage, which Renwick had attempted to flag for a system audit, a process that would have delayed its retrieval by 48 hours, was secured by the OPP's Technical Standards Unit before the audit request was processed. JAG had already flagged it. The footage showed everything. The angle of Renwick's approach, the moment he picked up Serena's purse without asking, the expression on his face when he looked at the DND card and put it back without making a single verification call, the zip tie going on a full 3 seconds after she had ceased all movement. It showed everything, and it was obtained before anything could happen to it. The professional standards investigation lasted 6 weeks. It expanded, the way these investigations expand when they begin to find things, from the initial incident to Renwick's 17 prior stops on Highway 11 in the past 11 months, 13 of which involved black or indigenous drivers, none of whom had been charged with anything, all of whom had received citations that were later reviewed and found to have procedural irregularities. It expanded to Faris, whose record showed 4 prior complaints from members of the public, none of which had proceeded because the subjects hadn't known how to navigate the process. It expanded to the detachment supervision structure, and to the question of what Leclerc had known and when. The OPP Commissioner gave a press conference. She was direct and she was careful, and she used the word accountability 11 times in 14 minutes. She announced an independent review of stop and detain practices across 6 Northern Ontario detachments. She announced a new mandatory verification protocol for military identification to be implemented in 12 weeks. Serena did not attend the press conference. She was in Ottawa. She was sitting in a conference room in NDHQ doing the job she had been driving to do when she was stopped on the highway. But the day after the sentencing hearing, Renwick terminated, Faris terminated, both facing a human rights tribunal process that would follow them for years. She drove back up Highway 11. She drove her Escalade, retrieved without a scratch thanks to the tow yard's sudden intense interest in doing things by the book once the DND's property officer had called. The October sky was the same pewter grey. The overpass looked exactly the same. She pulled onto the shoulder in the exact spot and sat with the engine running for a moment. Then she got out and walked to the tree line. She was meeting someone. A woman in her 60s came across the gravel, moving slowly. Her name was Doreen Faris. She was Derek Faris's wife, or had been until the sentencing hearing, when she had stopped being his wife in any sense that mattered to either of them, though the paperwork hadn't caught up yet. She was wearing a cloth coat and holding her own hands in front of her, and she looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had only recently understood that it was hers to carry. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Doreen said. "You asked?" Serena said. "I wanted to say." Doreen stopped, started again. "He wasn't always. There was a time when he wasn't." She looked at the highway. "I don't know when it changed. I think I stopped asking." Serena looked at her for a moment. What he was or wasn't before doesn't change what happened on that road. But what happens next, to you, to the people he stopped over the years, that's still being written. Doreen reached into her coat pocket. She brought out a small envelope. "He asked me to give you this. He said you didn't have to open it." Serena took it. She didn't open it there. She put it in her coat pocket and thought about what it would say later, when she was somewhere private. She thought it would probably be an apology that was also an explanation. And she had learned long ago that those two things are not the same thing, even when they arrive in the same envelope. "Tell him I received it," she said. She drove back to Borden on the same highway. She passed the overpass and didn't slow down. On the radio, a woman was talking about the independent review, about the new identification protocols, about the 23 people who had come forward since the story broke to describe their own stops on that stretch of road, their own citations, their own hours lost, their own dignity taken and never given back. 23 people, and those were only the ones who had heard there was somewhere to send the story. In the months that followed, the OPP implemented the new military ID verification protocol ahead of schedule. The Human Rights Tribunal process resulted in a settlement for 11 of the 17 drivers identified in the extended investigation. Doreen Farris moved to Sault Ste. Marie to be closer to her sister. Nadia, the nursing student who had started the avalanche with 4 words and a photograph, was interviewed by the Globe and Mail and used the platform to talk, carefully and specifically, about what it costs ordinary people to fight back without stars on their shoulders. Constable Travis Renwick, former employee of the Ontario Provincial Police, did not give any interviews. He did not have to. The footage said everything that needed to be said. And Colonel Serena Ibarra-Nichols, 4 months after the incident on Highway 11, in a ceremony at Rideau Hall that she attended in full service dress, every ribbon in its proper place, was promoted to Brigadier General. She did not make a speech about what happened on the highway. She didn't need to. The job she had been given, a new portfolio within Army Strategic Command focused on institutional accountability and personnel equity, said everything for her. She was no longer just following the rules, she was writing them. There is a lesson in this story, and it is not the one that is easy to hear. It is not simply that powerful people get justice. It is that the system finally moved because it had no choice, because the rank was undeniable, because the footage was recovered, because a nursing student posted 4 words before anyone could get ahead of it. The lesson is the question underneath. How many times did the system have every chance to move and chose not to, because the person on the shoulder of the road didn't have a DIA data logger in their vehicle, didn't have a direct line to a 3-star general, didn't have 28 years of service that made the injustice impossible to ignore? That question doesn't have a comfortable answer, but it has to be asked out loud. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe accountability should not depend on rank, leave a comment below, because those words matter too, even without a star on the shoulder. I keep coming back to the moment Colonel Ibarra-Nichols stood on that gravel shoulder in her camel peacoat, hands visible, voice level, and said, "May I ask the reason for the stop?" Not because the answer mattered to Constable Renwick. It didn't, but because she asked anyway. That's the part I can't shake. There's a version of this story where people focus on the rank, the 4 maple leaves, the direct line to Ottawa, the DND data logger that made everything undeniable. And yes, those things mattered. I'm not going to pretend they didn't, but I think the rank was almost beside the point. What actually dismantled those 2 officers wasn't the call to the operations centre. It was the 28 years of choices that made her the kind of person who stays composed when a zip tie is going on too tight, who narrates her own movements on a cold highway the way you teach your kids to do, who walks into a detachment booking room and still speaks with the precision of someone who knows exactly what she is worth and refuses to let the room decide otherwise. That's not something a rank gives you. That's something you build, one decision at a time, usually when nobody's watching. What I find harder to sit with is the cost of it. She didn't ask to become the case that changed the protocol. She was driving back from her mother's grave. She had a briefing to get to, and a Tim Hortons going cold in the cup holder, and she was minding her own business on a highway she had every right to be on. The fact that her composure and her credentials meant the system finally moved, that should make us grateful, and it should also make us uncomfortable. Because Nadia, the nursing student who posted 4 words and a photograph, had been on the same shoulder 8 months earlier. Nobody sent helicopters for her. Nobody fast-tracked a professional standards review. She got a citation with procedural irregularities and a process she didn't know how to navigate, and she went home carrying it alone. 23 people came forward once the story broke. 23, and those are only the ones who heard there was somewhere to send it. What Renwick and Farris did was not complicated in the end. They saw a black woman in an expensive vehicle and decided before a single word was spoken what category she belonged in. That's not an instinct, that's a habit. And habits form because they're allowed to, because the cost of them stays invisible until someone like Serena Ibarra-Nichols makes it impossible to look away. I think about the kind of integrity it takes to stay that still under that kind of pressure. Not to perform calmness, but to actually be rooted enough that you can keep thinking clearly when someone is trying to make you feel small. That's a form of intelligence that has nothing to do with credentials, It's about knowing yourself well enough that other people's certainty about who you are doesn't become yours. And then there's the sheer persistence of it. 28 years of climbing a ladder that was never built with her in mind, never once letting the accumulated weight of that become an excuse to stop. The system moved because she gave it no choice, but she gave it no choice because of who she chose to be long before that Sunday morning on Highway 11. That's the thing about consequences. They're almost never really about the single moment they arrive. They're about everything that was true before anyone was paying attention.